morning, everyone. Better use this, hey. My name's Phil, if I haven't met you. And I'm here to continue with our theme for January, which is the theme of rest. And it's a bit of a continuation of what we heard from Gus a couple of weeks ago. So focusing on this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, written by John Mark Comer. The subtitle is How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of Our Modern World. So it's certainly the most significant book I read last year and one of the most significant in my life. But before I go any further, I just want to pray. So please pray with me. Lord, I just thank you for your presence here with us today. I pray that the words I speak are the words you want me to speak, and that you open our hearts and ears to hear what you want us to hear. In Jesus' name, amen. So I do feel like God's having a bit of a laugh at me. I really felt prompted when I read this book. I felt prompted that I wanted to share on this, and then the opportunity came up with the theme of rest. I thought, well, put my hand up. But I am someone who hurries a lot. So, God's just having a little snigger with me up here today. I'm often trying to cram things in. But I would say that having read this book, since reading this book, I am on the improve. I've recognised some of my problems and I'm working at getting there. So hopefully I can share a bit of that with you today. But just so you know, John Mark Comer, he's a pastor and teacher and writer from Portland in the USA. He's written numerous books. He's written a subsequent book to this one that I won't get to today. Maybe that can be next January. He's taken a lot of direction from people such as John Ortberg and Dallas Willard, who I'm sure many of you have heard of. So I'm going to start with a short summary. Hurry is a form of violence on the soul. That's a key message today. It's a pretty hard-hitting statement, but I do believe that. Eliminating hurry, because it is such a form of violence on the soul, eliminating hurry requires a ruthless approach, a really strong game plan to counter the very strong societal forces that drag us towards hurry. But where do we start? Well, there's no better example of an unhurried life than the life that Jesus led when he was here on earth. So I'll cover that in the next 20 minutes or so. But I want to start with a story. There's a story in the book that really resonated with me, and it goes like this. So at the height of British colonialism, an English traveller lands in Africa, intent on a rapid journey through the jungle. He charters some local porters to carry his supplies, and after an exhausting day of walking and a short night's sleep, he gets up early to continue the journey the next day. But his porters refuse. Exasperated, he begins to cajole, bribe, plead, but nothing works. They won't move a centimetre. He asks why. The answer? They are waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. Have you ever felt like that? Where your soul is lagging behind the pace at which your mind and body are moving? I felt it a few weeks ago, just before Christmas. Louise and I went camping one weekend, and we arrived and set up at a beautiful campground up near Mount Field. Louise asked what I wanted to do, and I'm someone who loves to do stuff. I'm always thinking of what we can do, always active. And we were in this little mini Garden of Eden, I felt. There's so many things to do and see, but all I could think of was that story and just needing to be still for a while. We'd had a busy few weeks. I just needed time for my soul to rest and to catch up with my body and especially my mind, and slowing everything down so that my spirit could catch up. And it was just, I don't know how long I needed. I was done when I was done. But it was really, really important. Jesus said in Mark chapter 8, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Is anything worth more than your soul?" The book quotes Dallas Willard saying that hurry is the root problem underneath so many symptoms of toxicity in our world. Jesus said that the greatest commandments were to love God with all our heart, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. So we're called to love. But as we heard a couple of weeks ago from Gus, hurry and love are incompatible. Love is time-consuming. The Apostle Paul's definition of love, says firstly that love is patient. Hurry and patience don't go together either. And with hurry comes distraction. We're distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. John Ortberg said that for a great many of us, the danger is not that we will renounce our faith. It's that we will become so distracted and rushed and preoccupied that we will settle for a mediocre version of it. We'll just skim our lives instead of actually living them. Gus also talked about people saying that they need more time or that they don't have enough time. Why is it that despite all of the amazing array of labour-saving devices that have been developed over the last century, people seem to feel like they have less time, not more? Rather than go and chop a tree for a fire to keep warm, we flick a thermostat. We've got cars to travel rather than having to walk. Dishwashers, washing machines, the internet for information rather than having to go travel to the library, search a catalogue, find a book to get some information. Yet so many of us feel more and more rushed. A researcher at Microsoft said that continuous partial attention is the new normal. Continuous partial attention. Never giving anyone or anything your full attention. When I read that in a book, it hit me like a bit of a sledgehammer, but it was like a sledgehammer of realisation that, yeah, that's true. I often realise I'm doing it. You know, there's been times where I step outside myself for a millisecond and say, look at you. Someone's talking to you and you're not paying attention. You're half looking at your phone, you're thinking about something else. And I feel guilty at my inability to give my full attention. I've seen my kids' reactions at various times as they're growing up in particular. Nothing's said, but they know that I haven't paid full attention and have not taken in something important that they were telling me. And what is all this distraction, addiction to devices and pace of life doing to our souls? As I said in the summary, hurry is a form of violence on the soul. We seem to talk so much about the pros of the modern digital age, and there are many, but we rarely say anything about the cons. Is it a net positive? We should scrutinise and critique the benefits and cons of every technology and put controls in place to make sure there is a net benefit. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. Psychologists and mental health professionals are now talking about an epidemic of the modern world, hurry sickness. Hurry kills relationships. Love takes time. Hurry doesn't have it. It kills joy, gratitude, appreciation. People in a rush don't have time to enter the goodness of the moment. It kills wisdom. Wisdom is born in the quiet, the slow. Wisdom has its own pace. It makes you wait for it. Wait for the inner voice to come to the surface on your mind, but not until your thoughts are calm. So that's the problem. So what do we do? How do we slow down, simplify, and live deliberately right in the middle of the chaos of the noisy, fast-paced, urban, digital world that we call home? The answer, according to John Mark Comer, is easy. Follow Jesus. We need to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God who died for us and rose again to free us from our sins. He's also the most brilliant, most insightful, most thought-provoking teacher to ever walk the earth. And he lived his earthly life without hurry. By doing as Jesus did, we can start to eliminate hurry from our lives. There are so many examples of Jesus not being hurried in the Bible. I'm just going to cover 3 of them. Firstly, he waited 3 decades to start his ministry. And after 1 day on the job as Messiah, he went into the wilderness alone for 40 days to pray and be tested. Then there was when Jesus was preaching and Jairus literally fell at his feet, begging him to come and heal his sick daughter, who was at the point of death. Jesus agreed to come, but on the way to Jairus' home, a woman with a chronic health condition interrupted Jesus. He healed her and took all the time that he needed with her. But can you imagine how Jairus would have felt during this time? His daughter's on the point of death. He's tapping his foot. He's silently mouthing, "Come on, Jesus. Come on, we've got to go." But Jesus took the time that he needed. He was not to be hurried. In John chapter 8, again, another great example. We see Jesus being pressured by the Pharisees about a woman caught in adultery. They were trying to put pressure on him and catch him out. What did Jesus do? He wrote in the dirt with his finger. It's like Jesus is God. He didn't need time to think about what he was going to say to them. They had to keep on challenging him before he spoke, but he clearly wanted to show that he wasn't pressured, wasn't hurried, and he would take his time. Jesus demonstrated an ability to be fully present in every situation, and whilst he was busy, he was never hurried. Now, margin can be seen as the space between our load and our limits. And for many of us, there is little or no space between our load and our limits, no margin. Jesus also made sure to inject a healthy dose of margin into his life. And I must say, as a father of 4 kids, I've felt I've had zero margin at many times in my life, particularly when the kids were young. Now, there is a healthy kind of busyness where your life is full of things that matter, not wasted on empty leisure or trivial pursuits. And by that definition, Jesus was busy. The problem is not when you've got a lot to do. It's when you have too much to do and the only way to keep up the quota is to hurry. I think that one of our problems is that we associate busy with hurry as well. Just because we're busy doesn't mean that we should be hurrying. Jesus' weekly schedule was busy, but it was a prophetic act against the hurried rhythms of our world. He would regularly get up early and go off to a quiet place to be with his Father. Sometimes he'd go away overnight or longer just to get away from the crowds and gather himself to God. There are stories in the Bible about Jesus sleeping in and the disciples having to wake him up. He would take the time to enjoy long meals with friends, creating space for in-depth conversations about the highs and lows of life. Jesus practiced a simple, unhurried life, where space for God and love for people were the top priorities. He was busy, but he aligned his schedule with his values and priorities. He was often exhausted, so he prioritized time out to rest and nourish his soul. And particularly in the digital age that we're in, Comer says in the book that eliminating hurry requires a ruthless approach and a strong game plan to counter the forces that drag us towards hurry. And Jesus is one of those examples that we can look to. But the book, as we heard a couple of weeks ago, has 4 practices, 4 areas to work on to unhurry your life. They are silence and solitude, slowing, Sabbath, and simplicity. Now, Gus covered 2 of these, silence and solitude and slowing. I'm going to add a little bit of my perspective on those, but I'll particularly want to talk about the other 2, Sabbath and simplicity. So firstly, silence and solitude. Now, I'm going to start with a Mentimeter question here. So at the risk of being distracted by your technology, grab your phones and a question should come up here, or you can either log on to Menti or scan that QR code. The question is, when nothing is occupying my attention, the first thing I do is reach for my phone. Now, this is a yes or no question. If you do it mostly, then answer yes, I would suggest. I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Yes, be honest, Graham. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Now, my mathematical head, oh no, I'll wait for the stats here. 3210, that'll do. So it's really interesting because it talks about this in the book, and it says a Microsoft survey this was of young adults, not all adults, but found that 77% of young adults answered yes. We're about right on 77% there across everybody. I would have answered yes as well. So I'd push it up a little bit higher. Now, I won't ask people to put hands up, but I wonder who got distracted by a notification when they got their phones out. We need to fight the digital age of distraction, which is robbing us of our ability to be present to God and to be present to other people, even present to our own souls. We also need to be okay with being bored sometimes. Being bored can sometimes lead to creativity and can allow time for your inner voice, for God to speak into your heart. In Luke chapter 5, verse 15, it says, vast crowds of people came to hear Jesus preach and be healed of their diseases. But the very next sentence is, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke's gospel records Jesus going to a quiet place no less than 9 times. Now, solitude is where you set aside time to feed and water and nourish your soul. The Dutch priest and philosopher Henri Nouwen said that without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. Without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. So where is your quiet place where you can be alone with God and with your soul? I have a place that will come up in a picture in a minute. Coming? No. It's almost coming. I'll keep talking. There it is. So our family know this place as the Seat of Gratitude. It's on the shore of the river just down from our house in Tranmere. Now, we have a policy where if you ever walk past the Seat of Gratitude, you've got to give thanks for something. Now, and I often spend time there. I spent some time there late yesterday afternoon just preparing for today. I don't spend anywhere near enough time there. Why that's the case, I don't know. I'm just dumb. Because I find that time so valuable. There's been so many times when I've been there and I feel God put words in my heart. Or I'm watching nature and looking at a rock poking up above the tide and seeing little ripples of waves and just getting that feeling that, to be strong and resilient like that rock as the world just laps little things at you constantly. It's just, it is really, really valuable. But I just don't do it enough. Secondly, slowing. So a few Christian teachers have suggested cultivating a spiritual discipline of slowing where we deliberately choose to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. The idea being that if we can slow down both the pace at which we think and the pace at which we move our bodies through the world, maybe we can slow down our souls to a pace at which they can catch up with our bodies and our minds. So Comer gives 20 ideas or rules for slowing down your life. Too many to go through today, and Gus mentioned a few last week, so I'm just going to mention or 2 weeks ago. I'm just going to mention a few more. So Gus talked about getting in the slow lane at the supermarket. You know, use it as a chance to talk to someone in the queue or talk to the checkout operator as well. He points to a deeper motivation here that it's wise to regularly deny ourselves something, you know, getting what we want, whether that's something like fasting or getting into the longest queue at the shop. It's showing up early for appointments without your phone or with it safely in your pocket. I'm not very good at that. I time my arrival. If I'm catching the bus, I time it to like 30 seconds. Louise, on the other hand, my wife, she's 5 minutes, and great example. There's so much we can do with our phones in terms of limiting updates and notifications. One tip in the book, and a couple of my kids do this, is put your phone on grayscale mode. So you just get everything's in black and white. There's studies that show that this decreases dopamine addiction. I've been planning to start. I haven't started yet. My only excuse is I don't know how. But one of my kids who does it is here. So after the church. And single task. Multitasking's a myth. I've read that in many books, and it makes so much sense. An attitude of multitasking doesn't represent progress. Our Indigenous brothers and sisters can teach us a lot about slowing. Past mission trips I've done up to Borroloola in the Northern Territory have been a great lesson for me in just being, in working on event time rather than being obsessed with clock time. The power of presence and being comfortable in silence. So the third area, Sabbath. So Renata reflected 3 weeks ago on the Old Testament references and commands to the Sabbath. It's an important commandment, as we heard. But Jesus reminded us that the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It might be a commandment, but it's not there just as a rule to simply be obeyed, which is what the Pharisees thought. It is there because it's good for us. But due to our immaturity, dysfunction, and addiction, God has to command his people to do something deeply life-giving, to rest. One of John Mark Comer's challenges in the book is to go a day a week without buying anything as part of Sabbath. I've taken this up recently. I'm simply calling it Buy Nothing Sundays. So not only do I not buy anything at the shop, I won't go into a shop. I won't even browse online. I've broken it a couple of times, but I've been okay. But I do find it's been really valuable. It just brings me back to simple, important things and realising that I have enough. I don't need more. And I'll come to that when I talk about simplicity. You know, if we're short on a dinner ingredient, we just make do. Comer also suggests drinking deeply from the well of ordinary life. A meal with friends, time with family, a bushwalk, afternoon tea. All great things to do on Sabbath. Slow down long enough to enjoy time with God and delight in his creation and his people. It can deliver what materialism promises but can never deliver: contentment. That leads us to the fourth and last area to talk about, simplicity. So what is simplicity? Well, it's just living with less stuff. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus said, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist of an abundance of possessions." Most of us simply have too much stuff to enjoy life at a healthy, unhurried pace. The French sociologist Jean Baudrillard claims that materialism has become the new dominant system of meaning in the Western world. He argues that atheism hasn't replaced cultural Christianity, shopping has. The only God Jesus ever called out by name was Mammon, the god of money. Now, most advertising, we might know this, but I know it, but most advertising is a form of propaganda. But most people live the lie that more and more stuff equals more happiness. Comer says in the book, there is a half-truth in this. Studies show that more money can make you happier if you are really poor. But it's very much a law of diminishing returns to a point where more money equals more problems. But we're far more emotionally tricked and desire-driven than we care to admit because of all those forces around us. I know I am. Even though I know possessions don't bring happiness, I often don't live that way. So what do we do? Well, the answer is not going back to the Stone Age, because the problem isn't the stuff. It's that firstly, we put no limit on stuff due to our insatiable desire for more. And secondly, that we think, or at least we act, like we need all sorts of things to be happy, when in reality we need very few. And I must say that my example of the Buy Nothing Sunday for me just gives me that little reminder. Just little things, things that can work for you, might work, works for me, could work for you, or other things, just to bring us back to a point of simplicity. It's not about living with nothing, it's about living with less. Why do I love camping so much? Why do many people love camping? And for me, it's the simplicity of it. You cannot hurry when you're camping. Your options are limited, and you find you have time. Time to be, time for the people that you're with, time in creation. It's just so simple and so beautiful. There's a picture up there from a trip a few years ago. I've had so many opportunities to travel the world and go to some amazing places. But my favourite holiday is when we spent 1 month crowded into an old van with our 4 kids and we drove out to Uluru and around the outback. We stayed in 3 $20 tents. I couldn't find a photo of the tents, actually. That was the best I could find. But, you can see there, we're just bush camping, simple stuff. We just had a ball. But why do I always shift to more complex and more stuff when I see simplicity providing so much contentment? Well, life is a series of choices. Every yes is 1,000 no's. We have to learn to say no constantly. I think I mentioned this when I was up here a year ago. And I talked a little bit about some great secular books around on this, like a book called Essentialism, which was probably my favourite book of 2023. Essentialism says that valuing simplicity is very counter to the world's call. So it's hard to do. But Comer has 12 tips to practice simplicity. Now, again, I'm not going to go through all of those. Got the book here. I'll lend it to you. But a few of the tips, always considering the true cost of a purchase. Purchase doesn't just cost money, it costs time. Whether it's the time for the shopping, the time for owning the whatever it is that you buy and looking after it. There's the impact on the planet from purchasing it and on other people who have made it. He says to never impulse buy. Never. Which I suppose goes well with always considering the cost of a purchase. If you're gonna be impulse buying, you're not considering the true cost of a purchase. Get into the habit of sharing and giving things away and enjoying it. Cultivate a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures. I love to watch the clouds roll across the mountain from our house, admire the colours of the sunset, and enjoy a hot homemade masala tea. There's a picture of a sunset. It will come up just as one example. There's so every day. I find it so easy if I take the time to just see so many things that are just beautiful and provide so much contentment, and they're simple. Simplicity isn't the answer to the hurry of our modern world, but it is an answer. So, eliminating hurry, as I've said, requires a ruthless approach, a really strong game plan to counter the forces that drag us towards hurry. The goal is to come back to and stay close to God and our true selves and to keep our souls at peace. So I can't recommend this book highly enough. Even though Gus covered some of it, I've covered some of it. There's so much in it. I've read it, I've reread it, I've highlighted stuff, gone back over the highlights. But just in finishing, I want to ask, what's your plan? You've heard some of this today and a couple of weeks ago. What do you think? What do you need to do to start eliminating hurry from your life? So before the band comes up, I've got another question for you. I want you to think about one thing that you will do to start eliminating hurry from your life. Maybe it's something specific that's on your mind now. Or maybe it's taking the time to develop a plan, to set a code of conduct or a set of principles that you think will help you. So I've got a final Mentimeter question. That question being, what is the one thing I can start doing or need to do to start eliminating hurry from my life? Keen to see what's on your mind. Time in nature. Time to be still in nature, yeah. Screen time, distractions, yeah, getting rid of distractions. There are so many, and I don't understand them all, but there's so many ways that we can use our phones to help us from being distracted, like whether it's as I said, the grayscale, turning off notifications, or only having them come once a day. There are many tools, we're just not made that aware of them. Yeah, screen time, reading, quiet time, meditate. That's great. I really encourage you to take time. Like I've said, I've found that there's a lot of things I realise are good, but I don't do them. So it's that having that plan and holding yourself accountable in some way to a plan. You know, a plan that has some of those ideas on there and a way to help stick to them. So, band, you can start coming back up. I'm just going to pray shortly before we finish. So, Lord, just thank you for this time today. We just pray for your help. Thank you for the example of Jesus in leading an unhurried life, in being busy, but taking the time, whatever time was needed, to deal with important things that you would have him deal with. We pray for help for us to busy ourselves with things that are important, but to not hurry, to take time out, to rest, to let our souls catch up with our bodies, Lord, and our minds. It's difficult in this age of so much information and just so many forces against it. But we know that with your strength, in your strength, that we can do it. So just pray for that strength, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.